All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our ever first podcast here. My name is Anthony. This is Mike with me. We are calling ourselves the Almost Mediocre Sports Guys. So basically, we are here to just kind of give our opinions.
Emphasis on
Yep.
mediocre.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We're basically just here to have some fun, have some conversations about sports, our opinions, kind of maybe our knowledge. Between the two of us, we have a lot of years of watching sports. I've been watching sports myself for years. I mean, that's pretty much the only thing I enjoy watching most of the time. Um, um, so we just kind of out here just enjoying sports like we like to. Want to just kind of give our opinions, what we think about certain types of things going on nowadays. May even jump back into back in the day how games used to be played before. We'll make predictions about games. We will talk about certain games that happen, any type of events going on recently. Also, anybody that tunes in, feel free to always ask us any questions that you feel about it. We try to keep up with as many sports as possible. Definitely try to key around our main sports being, for the most part, basketball, football, and baseball are kind of our top of the line. Would you say, Mike? I guess probably is our top way that we pretty much are probably most knowledgeable in, if we had to say sports. Um, so I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mike. Mike, go ahead and just like kind of let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hopefully, as we go forward, we, between Anthony and myself, we'll bring some enjoyment to some people, a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of insight, a little bit of history. But as Anthony mentioned, it's essentially built around just the idea that, we just, individually, our entire lives have been built around sports as fans and some participation, but most of it built around just being fans of just sports in general. I originate out of North Carolina, so obviously I bleed Carolina blue with a little hue of Duke, with a little Wake Forest thrown in, and certainly a little bit of red of North Carolina State. But so grew up a big Tar Heel fan. Eventually wound up in Colorado, right around the time of the Orange Crush and the beginnings of their successes as a franchise with the Denver Broncos. So I was fortunate enough to experience a lot of their successes as a fan, and along the way, sort of sidecarded myself with John Elway and his successes and his accomplishments, and just jumped on for the ride. Some will disagree. Hopefully, some will agree that I personally consider John still to be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the history of the game. Again, I know there's a number of people out there that will counter that statement, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, is a little bit of disagreement, a little bit of agreement, but a lot of good conversation. But with my enthusiasm for the games themselves and sports in general, when he stepped away, if there was ever a time where I was biased about sports or about a team, the Broncos were probably that team. So when John stepped away, I think my bias towards any individual or a team itself, it sort of retired with that. And I like to think that with that, I allowed myself to become more open-minded about the successes and failures of teams in general, and hopefully providing a more fair insight, certainly from a perspective and opinion. Part of what Anthony and I like to do when we get together, away from the bright lights of TV as we're doing right now, um, we like to just talk and speak on topics all sports related. As Anthony mentioned, we have our strong points, we have our weak points, but along the way, we'll continue to educate ourselves on all aspects of sports, those that we feel that we certainly need to. But away from the bright lights, Anthony and I enjoy a lot of good conversation about current topics, historic topics, and that type of thing. But again, as we go forward, hopefully Anthony and I will engage in some very interesting topics, insightful topics. And as he mentioned too, please feel free to submit your comments, criticisms, endorsements, because that's what it's about. It's about sports and what it brings to our lives, and pluses and minuses, the irritations and the joys. So hopefully, like I said, as we go forward, that's what we'll help bring to our
Yeah,
viewers.
I definitely agree. Feel free to bring it all in because it's not just our opinions. We want to hear the opinions of everybody else out there. We like to see where everybody's from. Who tunes into this. Hopefully this is something that we can make big for everybody. Where it's not just one of those other shows where everybody just comes in and gives their opinion about what's going on nowadays and who's not this guy and who's not that guy and all the bad stuff going on. We'd like to hear opinions from everybody else out here. Teams you like, past teams you like, past players you guys may have enjoyed watching or something like that, because we're going to get into all that. That's something we're going to dive into, as we go in, as we get into this. We'll talk about tons of stuff. I mean, like Mike said, we'd love to have conversations about anything, whether it be who's the greatest hockey player ever, to who's the greatest football player ever, to baseball, to whatever, and we will step outside of our boundaries as far as, we love college basketball. Um, College football is getting to that time frame now where we're getting to the playoffs, and we've seen a couple of upsets happen. Recently today with and yesterday with USC and going down, and TCU going down today to Kansas State. Things like that we want to get into, not just as much as we want to get into the back in the day stuff. And I kind of agreed definitely with Mike too when he was brought up about the non-biased stuff. I used to be huge bias towards any of my teams. I'm, kind of a little bit about me. Background is I'm from Denver, Colorado. Born and raised here. Don't feel like I'll ever leave here. I love Colorado. I love it here. I'll travel. I'll definitely travel, go see other places. But as far as where I want to stay, Colorado is my hometown. It always will be. I love all my Colorado teams. As far as Broncos, don't kill me, Bronco fans or people about Broncos. I know we're struggling right now, but my Nuggets, my Rockies, Avalanche, I love them all. But we don't want it to just be about the teams that we enjoy. We want to get into this as the most non-biased group that we can be, and being to the point where, yes, Mike said we do. I'm the same with him. We love Carolina. We're big Carolina fans when it comes to college basketball, football, things like that. I'm also a Bama fan myself, but it's not going to be that way. Mike and I have had conversations thoroughly about the college basketball or college football, and I've even told him, that Bama doesn't deserve to be in, and that's coming straight from me being a huge Bama fan. They lost certain games, and that's what we want to come in and do this for you guys, is not just be those guys that are like, oh, they're only the hometown teams. They're only going to talk about Denver. They're only going to talk about Carolina. That's all they are, and they're going to be biased. No, we're here to try to bring a different looks and outlook to stuff. Being able to talk about anything, anybody, and not necessarily, shine down. I mean, we have tons of stuff that we can go about. There's the Jordan LeBron debate. There's who's the greatest athlete ever to play a sport, things like that. And we're not just going to sit here and stick with the same answers. We'll be able to talk about it and see what the best possible situation or the best outcome when we talk about those. And like I said, feel free to let us know if you guys think differently and as to why you feel different. We'll definitely keep an eye on those comments. We'll definitely keep an eye on that. And, you know, try to answer as many questions as possible if we can, and also, maybe if you guys throw stuff out there when we go back and check our things and look at, comments, that's something we can use as another tool for us. Hey, we might be thinking, well, what should we talk about? Well, remember when somebody put this in the chat? Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll throw that in as a topic for us. So definitely, hope you guys enjoy it. Our first topic we're going to
And
talk
one other,
about today, Mike was definitely wanting to talk about organizations and the dysfunctions around organizations recently, because it seems like there's a lot of problems going on with whether it be owners, whether it be GMs, players themselves, coaches themselves. So Mike, I'm gonna kind of let you start off the topic. Kind of get you started rolling on this one, and kind of let us know what you're feeling and kind of where you stand on this.
I'm going to focus around three teams in particular, and with this particular segment, I could extend out to the other three leagues if I not so much actually hockey. I actually feel that ironically, what hockey does with their format and what Bettman does with the organization as commissioner, I think is pretty well done at this point in time. I think that's evidenced by the fact that currently we don't see at this point in time we don't see the outrageous salaries, Anthony, with hockey like we do with baseball, basketball, and football. Now, is that to say that won't happen? I'm sure, as we progress forward, it'll encompass all sports. But right now, I just think right now of the four sports, hockey continues to have a balance that has been lost on the other three, leagues, so to speak. But with this particular segment, I'm going to focus on three teams that reside within the NFL. And you and I were talking the other day, and we've spoken briefly about, the Denver Broncos, the Indianapolis Colts, and, to a lesser degree, the Arizona Cardinals. And obviously, when you're talking about Denver, they're the national topic right now, and it focuses more so, on Nathaniel Hackett, and it, also obviously with Russell Wilson thrown in, those are figures that you can gravitate towards because they're the high profile aspects of the team. You
Yep.
got the head coach and you got the starting quarterback.
Definitely.
And I can understand that. And they both have responsibilities and accountabilities for what's going on within the organization and what's happened this season. But if we look, and I bring this up because I think obviously you and I, we look at the various sports sites, aside from the national spotlight, areas like ESPN and Fox Sports and things like that. I'm talking about even other podcasts and those types of areas of sports. A lot of people want to focus again on Hackett and Wilson, but I really think what's being lost in the equation is, to a point where we've talked about briefly, if you look at the franchise as a whole with the Broncos, you see a franchise that, they really experienced their first successes with the Kaiser family back in the 70s, with the Orange Crush, and as they moved forward from there. And that segued into, Pat Bowling taking the team over in the 80s and obviously building what he turned into one of the, as it was considered to be, one of the best run organizations in all of professional sports, not just
Definitely.
football.
Yep. I agree.
Mr. Bowen had a passion for the game. He had a passion for the Broncos, for the fan base, and it showed. It showed in how they drafted. It showed in how they retained players, how they retained coaches. It was an area that, again, Bowen involved himself in all aspects of the organization.
Yep.
That's how much it meant to him. What I think we're seeing, if I use the Broncos as an example, and as they are currently, and I'm going to exclude the acquisition by, and I refer to them as the Walmart family for the moment. So if I put aside, the Walmart family, if you will, because this is a purchase that was just recently made, so they have yet to really truly make any sizable moves aside from the Russell Wilson situation. Um, but if I look to where this began, as you and I talked about, I really believe it originated with, obviously, Mr. Bowen and his issues with Alzheimer's and what that progressed and turned into, and obviously ultimately his passing. What I saw begin to take place as he began to decline, was a collection of family members that had put aside what should have been the focal point of the family as a whole, really. I mean, you're looking at a family who, at least a portion of their fortune was now built around this organization. And yet, all you seem to hear about and see in everything that was put in the paper or papers was, well, I'm sorry, I'm not happy with this family member. I'm not happy with that family member. What is in this for me? What can I take from this? So, from where we were with Mr. Bowen and a complete investment in the franchise itself, we had disintegrated into a collection of kids with no interest in this organization whatsoever, obviously indifferent as to where it was going where its direction was headed. And ultimately, what I think you were beginning to see is because of this lack of commitment, this lack of interest, you know, the runnings of the franchise now fell on other people within the organization. There was no accountability being held by anybody, and they can say whatever they want. But members of the organization, the higher ups, were now making their own decisions, aside from their own transgressions away from the field, DUIs and other types of indiscretions. Um, I think what you were seeing was not a collective unit working to better the team, individuals working to better themselves, and no one left to challenge anyone. And so what subsequently happened and where they are now is a franchise that even prior to Russell Wilson coming on board was a franchise that was truly, I mean, in dismay. I mean, they've gone through so many quarterbacks, since the retirement of Peyton Manning, that it's almost, jaw dropping.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
And
we've been. I mean, it's been
it's
crazy how many that they've gone through. The fact that it seems like, and I've brought this up a lot, and I've used this every time is I'm so tired of them using the band aid method. We
yeah,
the Broncos go out there and instead of just trying to go through the draft, which I know that they have, I mean, I'm not saying that they haven't drafted, they just haven't had the best success with who they have drafted in the draft. Obviously, with getting Tebow, who did take them to a playoff, win at least one time, but like Paxton Lynch, Brock was okay, type stuff, but ultimately he ended up moving on anyways, thinking that it was going to be a better situation for him, which it obviously didn't turn out the way he probably had thought. Unless he was just looking to make a paycheck, then obviously he did the right thing. But if he was looking to try to make a career out of this, I think he went the wrong way. I think the best possible situation maybe for Brock that could have been is maybe taking that spot over for Denver, and there could have been a chance there with Brock, possibly being a franchise quarterback, but he went elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, it's always a band aid effect, meaning after Elway, it's just been let's just find out, let's just go get a quarterback that's already been after his prime but can still play. We've had Plummer, we've had Manning, now Russ, things like that. And this situation with Russ is not good at all. This is
no,
just terrible with how bad he has been, how bad he looks out there. I mean, the stories you hear about him throwing, um, audibles out there from Seattle last year that nobody on the team knew about. Um,
yeah,
so this is kind of one of those things that for Denver, I've talked to you about this. I believe, you talked about when they first started, the 60s were kind of bad, for them at a time. But I think right now for Denver, this is the worst season ever in franchise history, with given that we have Russell Wilson on the team. The defense is really, really great. It feels like they're just kind of letting that go, which is unfortunate. We have great young talented wide receivers that should be making plays. And I'm not putting this on Russ. There's other situations where whether it be coaching too. I know we got problems there. Who knows if Hackett's going to last the rest of the year? If he does last the year, is he coming back next year? We obviously have tons of work to look at on the O line for Denver. There's a lot of work that needs to go to there. I get that there's injuries, but who doesn't have injuries in NFL nowadays? There's lots of teams out there that have injuries, and they still overcome it. So it's just one of those
Yeah.
things where if you do have injuries, I get it. There is a problem with it, but that's where the coaching comes in. You got to start coaching these players to become better. So it's like next man in line. We everybody hears that all the time. You've heard that back when you were playing high school days or whatever. So, you may be on the bench or something like that. Somebody gets hurt. It's next man up. You have to be prepared no matter what, and especially at this high level, you're in the NFL. There's nothing past the NFL. You're in the highest level possible. At all times, you should be playing at that level. Regardless if you're the third string left tackle, or you're the star quarterback. Everybody should be given the same effort, and everything should be the same way. But um, like I said, that's part of the coaching. That's part of who these organizations bring in, and Denver has not made those right decisions, those right moves recently on who they have brought in. And it's been like that for a good almost at least except since Peyton's been gone. And literally since we've unfortunately lost Bolin in Denver. That's kind of one of those things that's been kind of rough too. Is the things wrong decision making in Denver has been the real key.
Well, and the other issue too, Bud, is again, if you look back to the ownership, and where was that under the Bowen family, and where you're at now, and what you have now, aside from Russ and aside from Hackett, is you've got a front office, as you and I talked about. And the very first thing I would do as an owner of this franchise is I would come in, I would obviously assess where we're at. I'm a business person, so I'm not here to make stupid decisions, but I'm also not here to lose money. Now, putting aside Russ's contract, my observations have been that this organization as a whole and the front office, one of my first steps would be to come in and I would just about probably gut the entire front office. I think where we're at right now, I think where they're at right now is just almost stagnant. And again, no one's being challenged to make moves. No one's position is being threatened. It's a life of luxury for certain individuals because of these type of factors. So what really falls upon the Walmart family, if you will, is to come in and once you've made a proper assessment of everything, I really truly believe you've got to firstly, obviously we could sit here and we could discuss the Russ situation ad nauseum, but we'd be beating a dead horse at this point. We know where it's at, they know where it's at, but you've got to start looking beyond that. What you've got to start looking at right now is what's going on in your front office. What you need is a fresh approach. You've got when you're in a position, and I don't care what your job is, potentially you reach a point where you can almost coast. You're either not being challenged by the higher ups, potentially your job so well that you feel like there's nothing left to learn, which is never truly accurate. But you can reach a point of comfort that's detrimental to everyone. It's detrimental to
Yeah.
you. It's detrimental to the company that you represent. And I personally think that's where Denver is currently at. You need to bring in fresh faces, fresh minds, fresh ideas, and it's not a quick fix. Unfortunately, that's just not where you're at. But you've got to begin somewhere. Russ is established right now through the contract. Uh, and because of that contract, you obviously can't necessarily address that right now. So you've got to look at the other aspects of the team and ways to hopefully, maybe potentially there's still a way to better this individual. Maybe a fresh coaching approach will help us. We don't know. But it all begins for me with the front office. And again, that's become stagnant. It's unchallenged and there are no repercussions being dealt for any decisions being made. And the Russ decision was just this grandiose, mistake of mistakes. I'll never fully understand. I can never fathom the idea in all my years of watching sports, as you and I talked about the other day. I can't wrap my mind around the idea of guaranteeing that type of money to someone, anyone, who has yet to take a play, shoot a basket, slap a puck, or swing a bat for your organization. And this is the kind of money you dole out, and it's all based on reputation and not reality. And I struggle so much with this concept. I just can't believe that this was allowed, and there wasn't more thought process put into this. It's just
Yeah,
mind-boggling.
and I agree. It is frustrating. You give all that money and you haven't seen them play anything. Not one down, not one snap, no nothing. And this is the risk you take. Obviously being, an owner, general manager, um, even a coach, kind of going out there and saying, hey, I think we need to go get this person. We need to go do that. And if they don't succeed there, you know, that's a huge problem. And the thing is I feel like the organization hasn't really taken any, you know, they haven't like really accepted the fact that this isn't going well. Is what I feel like. You know what I mean? And like I said,
Yeah.
I know that they're new to this. They just bought they just bought the team. They probably didn't expect any of this to happen. Getting Russell Wilson here, I think the big key for them with getting Russ was the fact because we are bringing in a brand new coach. I mean, he's never done any coaching. He wasn't even the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. He was just the quarterbacks coach with Aaron Rodgers. So he's really fresh out. So it's more of, I think it was more of like, hey, if we have the chance to get, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, somebody that, you know, makes plays happen, is really good with, wide receivers, like the type that we have, I feel like the receivers we have are the type of wide receivers that Russ has had his whole career, in a way, so I felt like it should have helped a lot. But unfortunately, the way he's been playing this year, it wasn't the right decision to make. And Denver is stuck with that contract, unless they find a way to get rid of it. Denver's gonna have to figure out a way, and coming back to the organization now. Now they have to figure out a way. As being in the Denver organization now, you have to sit there and figure out how do we get through this. Do we go? I know they don't have a whole bunch of draft picks now, but you have to utilize the draft picks that you do have, and whether it
Yeah.
means going and getting people on the offensive line, helping out, on defense a little bit more. Even though we have a great defense, maybe that's something we have to work, harder on is a little bit better defense. Maybe trying to score more on defense. I know we're a top scoring defense. I know we're a great defense, here in Denver, but now is what the organization has to do is figure out exactly how to get through what they put themselves into now, and do it the best possible way with the 5 or 6 years that is left on Russ's contract. So you just utilize those picks and figure out exactly how to make this team better at this point now. They made moves with getting rid of with Melvin Gordon. I thought that was a great move. Just too many
Yeah.
fumbles. Fumbles at
Yeah.
key times in the games that hurt us. I'm not putting that on him either, like on the whole team, but he did make some key fumbles. That was a problem for them. Losing Javonte Williams was a huge loss though too this year. I think a lot of people need to understand that losing him was huge. With the fact that Russ can't throw like he used to, it seems like, and he's usually trying to get out of the pocket because the pocket's always collapsing on him because the O line needs help. Javonte would really have changed the changed the game for Denver because he would have ran more. I think you can take away Russ's passes and let Williams run more. Once he comes back next year, I think that's going to be a huge difference. I think people will see that once he's back and healthy, that he will make a difference, and because he'll open up what Russ is better at is in that play action, setting type stuff. So, um, like I said, just kind of like I said, I don't want to get too far off topic of your organization stuff, but this is where it comes into is this is the now it's part of the time for the organization to say, okay, made a mistake, but now we have to figure out how to do that. Whether it be making more trades for other players that we had to get picks back, whether it's just saying, oh well, bite the big one, we'll just utilize the picks that we do have and try to get the best possible players available to get us better, and saying maybe we go a different route with Hackett, and get somebody else in here. Then at that point you say, okay, now they're establishing, they're making moves to try to get better, and then it's up to the players at that point to start getting better, working, whether it be in getting more game film in, hitting the weight room more, whatever it needs to be. That's what needs to happen in Denver.
Yeah. And again, obviously, and with this first particular podcast, as we call it, the premiere, we're obviously going to try to move along here so we keep a good pace going. But, again, touching on the other two franchises without going into a lot of, in-depth detail, but just kind of a surface observation of what we're seeing and what we feel. I referenced obviously Denver. I'm talking about Indianapolis as well. There's different degrees of franchise failure, as I term it. And necessarily in regards to all three of these organizations, there are different degrees of failure, I find. Somewhat with Arizona and Denver, there are similarities. If you look at Kyler's contract, you look at Russ's contract. The first observation is excessive amounts of money. One attached to a player, as we just referenced, who hadn't even played it down for the organization yet, but this is what you bestow upon him without having him prove, his worth, so to speak. We've transitioned to Arizona. We've got a kid in Kyler Murray, who I think now it's becoming very well documented. And again, we won't beat the dead horse here because we're very familiar with the background and what's attached to this individual. Um, but aside from the lack of study habits, what I'm beginning to see now is really this what I term an egregious attitude. And I'm going to refer back to last week's post-game news conference. And I'm sorry, but as the leader of a football team, I believe you have to be a little bit more accountable as to how you conduct yourself. Not only when you're talking about the team as a whole, but if you're going to indirectly or whether you choose to directly, reference that person, do so in a manner that's, productive and not, overly critical. And really, it's counterproductive to everything you're supposed to be about. Whether you're frustrated with a coaching staff's play calling, substitutions, whatever the case may be, that's a concern you take to the person away from the spotlight, away from a collected group of media, individuals in a room,
Yeah.
and to make comments like that. And I'm not gonna repeat words because I don't use foul language. But a lot of people who are familiar with football and follow football, I'm sure they're very familiar with what you and I are talking about. But as I reference, organizational failure. Arizona as a franchise has never obviously been at the top of the success, mountain, so to speak. They've had their moments, obviously, back when Kurt Warner was the quarterback,
Yeah.
and they obviously made it to the Super Bowl and
Yeah,
subsequently
had a few
lost.
years there with Arizona with Plummer. He
Exactly.
kind of made a few runs there, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying with them.
But I was never, again, I was never. Do I think Kyler is a good athlete? I think he's a very good athlete. I think he's for an NFL quarterback. I think he's a little undersized. I think he has exceptional arm strength for his size. Obviously, his athletic ability speaks for itself. But when you look at the position of a quarterback, you have to look at the whole. You can't look at just a sum of the parts. You've got to have a collective individual. I think these days, a lot of franchises, a lot of coaching staffs, they're fascinated and they're enthralled by the idea of the mobile quarterback, the guy who can get out and make things happen. I understand that. I do. It's
Yeah,
flashy, it's
yeah,
attractive, it brings in the crowds, but ultimately I find that it for the most part, it's not, I won't say an absolute failure, but I'm going to struggle to say that it's more than a marginal success. And you and I we can run a list, we can run a laundry list of names that fall under this, under this description.
yeah,
And I'm telling you right now, people they want to argue that that a pocket quarterback in today's game doesn't succeed. Well, they do succeed. They succeed because they know how to navigate the game.
yeah,
They know how to stand in the pocket and they understand when to roll out, when to throw the ball, when to, and again, when to throw the ball away. There's a lot of things we could go into here, but we're going to keep it very surface for this first, podcast. But again, back to the franchise as a whole, Arizona and this contract that the owners agreed to, and allowing information that simply states or essentially states that your quarterback. Well, if we're gonna agree to this contract, then he has to agree to study time. I mean, this is
Yeah,
in today's game. That's an insane statement to have to make. That's an insane aspect of a contract to have to include.
exactly. I mean, because the thing is with him, I mean, you should have been already learning and watching game film, learning your own plays. That starts at the high school level, and even for me, I didn't play any high school football at all. My high school wasn't the best, and I always wanted to be ready for basketball season. That was my main sport was basketball, and I loved playing basketball. Um, but from everybody that I've heard, other players, that starts at the high school level. You get a playbook, you learn your plays. So for him to go into the NFL and be like, I'm not, I'm not watching any game film. I'm playing Madden or I'm playing COD, whatever he's doing
Yeah.
is just is ridiculous. It's kind of almost a kick in the stomach to these other quarterbacks who are working hard, sitting here. It's almost like he's saying, you know what, I'm too good for this. I don't need to do it. And I think that's where a lot of these people are coming after him is because it's like, how are you too good for this? I mean, you're barely just started in the league. You only been in here a few years, and you're trying to be better than the rest of us, and we've talked about this, Kyler could possibly be a top five quarterback in the league right now. But the fact that he doesn't take, the time to get any better, now he drops, below that. He's probably a top 20. He's in the 20 range maybe or something like that just because of the fact that he never gets any better. And you have quarterbacks now who are playing in the league who are starting to get better because they're working. Look at Tua. Tua is a great example.
Yeah.
Last year it was like, you can say what you want about if he got Hill, him getting Hill, Waddle, that's fine. Yes, it does make a huge difference, but he also has to throw those balls to those guys, and same thing. So he's gotten better. It used to be, oh well, he doesn't have the arm strength to throw deep, he does, have the accuracy to do this and that. He just little dunk and dive here. No, he's starting to throw the ball. He's starting to make better decisions. Out there, and that's just because you're just working. Trevor Lawrence, another great guy. Last year he led the league in interceptions as a rookie. It comes out. What is he doing now? He's getting better. He's getting better with that team. And does he have a pure number one wide receiver out there? I don't believe so. Um, you know, there's guys that have just stepped up every single game for him, and he's making plays for him. And I think Jacksonville is one of those teams that's gonna, get better as it goes on. But I'm gonna kind of go back in thinking about all three of these teams that you're talking about and talking about the organizations. All three of these teams kind of go back to what I was talking about with Denver as the Band Aid effect. You know, same thing with Indy. Indy's kind of running the same Band Aid effect since with since they lost Peyton themselves too, because first it was Luck, and Luck had his issues with the O line. He was tired of just getting beat up. Decided to retire. So what do they do after that? They had a few guys in there with Brissett, things like that. And then it turns out let's try Philip Rivers. He might be on his way out, but we can still try that. Philip Rivers couldn't get him over that hump. Let's go try Matt Ryan. It's the same thing. Arizona's the same way. They went and tried to get Chandler Jones. They went and got J.J. Watt. They're trying to get this Band-Aid effect. I would say Hopkins, but Hopkins is still kind of in his prime. But the fact is they went and got Hopkins, but look what happened this year. He gets caught with the PED problem. So now you're
Yeah.
still stuck in that situation. You know, all three of these teams, it feels like they do have that Band-Aid effect. You know what I mean? And that's not good for an organization when you're just trying to slap a Band-Aid on it to make it look like it's slap a Band-Aid on an open wound that's gushing blood, excuse me. But that's not going to work. It doesn't work that way. You got to get your draft picks in. You got to get guys that are that can play for you. It's hard nowadays. I don't want to get too off the topic here because we've talked about it before about how a lot of teams, that might be something we talk about is the loyalty to teams nowadays isn't what it used to be. But if you can get a good 4 to 5 years out of a player when they're great, that speaks a lot nowadays in the NFL, and that's something that none of these teams, you talk about those three teams, have really had recently as far as come draft wise. Other than maybe Indy maybe on the offensive line with oh, I forget his name, the offensive line there that they drafted. He's pretty good and stuff like that. But other than that, it seems like both these teams are in that, just like that band aid effect, and it's not great for organizations at all, in my opinion.
Well, and going back to Arizona real quick, and then we'll touch on Indianapolis just real quick. But the organizational failure aspect, and again, there's varying degrees of this attached to each team, and not entirely the same with either one of the three. But with Arizona, the organizational failure in regards to Kyler stems from the fact that you build it on speculation. You're speculating that what he could potentially show you and what he's already potentially shown you as proof that he's deserving of this contract. Yet in the contract, you stipulate that you have to study more for us to agree to this. You're contradicting yourself with that statement alone. That's an organizational failure.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that type of concern about an athlete, Anthony, then it would be you would be remiss to agree to something
Mm-hmm.
like this. You're contradicting your entire point that if you have those type of concerns, why would you agree to this contract in the first place? And you know, I'm sure there's a glorified statement for it, a cliched statement, but for me, excessive amounts of money at times can breed, they can breed excessive amounts of laziness, lack of effort. You no longer are necessarily motivated to maximize your ability. You don't need to. And I think potentially you can see that in someone like Kyler Murray. And like you said, Bud, and that was a great statement, Anthony, that these are the type of expectations, that you should have placed on you in high school. If you're going to succeed, and I understand he's one of the greatest athletes in the history of the state of Texas. That's fine. I can appreciate that. Athletic ability, guess what? Athletic ability, it carries you a long way in high school. It really does. Guess what? And there's another tier to that when you step into the college game. And you hope that you have that ability to transition to that level and succeed at it. Kyler had that ability. I still don't believe coming out of college that, for me personally, that he showcased, the skill set that's going to take a team to a Super
Yeah.
Bowl. That's
Yeah.
me. Obviously, Arizona saw something in that, but because of his successes, at Oklahoma, I'm sorry, that doesn't necessitate that he's going to carry that to the next level. You're talking about premier athletes at the NFL level. You're talking about the best of the best of the best. And you and I both know high school doesn't have this challenge. You're not facing the best of the best in high school. Guess what? In college, you're not facing the best of the best. It's a step up. There are different challenges, but it's a whole different level of competition when you finally make it to the top of the tier, and that's the NFL. And if you look at it from a physical standpoint, there's similarities in size to Drew Brees. Not so much physically, height wise, a decent arm, that type of thing. But does he have the leadership to warrant a contract like that? If you have concerns about his mental ability to be able to direct your football team and to remain focused on the objective, are you telling me that that warrants that kind of contract if those are your concerns? And yet you agreed to this, and now look where you're at. You've got a coach who literally in one particular video states, I couldn't tolerate playing for Kyler Murray as my coach. This is your coach referencing your starting
Yeah.
quarterback. What does that speak about the relationship? And so this again falls back to an organizational, you know, uh, failure. These are the type of things you have to take into consideration. Money does not buy you
Yeah.
success. It just
No, and I
doesn't.
agree. Definitely. Like I said, and I think this is a really great topic to start off on. For other people to understand that we've seen great organizations and how they've made adjustments to become great, and we touched more on football here, but if you think about like some of the great organizations that have been around, you think about how they all adjust. You know, I take a team like the San Antonio Spurs. Um, their whole organization is great. You know, even nowadays, you know, they're still not a great team, but they always find a way to win. You know, they're always somewhere there. You know, and I think that starts obviously they made the right decision when they got Pop coming in. Popovich is a great thing, and that's the thing is you just have to go out there and sometimes you will fail. As an organization, you will. No organization you know is out there winning, you know, championships after championship after championships all the time anymore. You know, you can go back to the Celtics and Lakers days. Yeah, they were, but then all of a sudden, you know, after a certain time frame, they started falling off, and things like that. So there's always somebody else making changes out there as an organization, and if you make the right changes and you're willing to put in the extra work as an organization, you're gonna succeed. And that's how just I always felt. You know, you brought up Pat Bowlen. I always felt he was always looking ahead. Pat Bowlen was always looking ahead. San Antonio was always looking ahead. New England, you know, was Robert Kraft. He was always looking ahead, to the next step. What's the next best thing that we could do? You know, for a while there, you know, I don't really want to get into baseball with organizations that much because it kind of sucks when you get into baseball because of the fact that these teams don't have one main salary cap and it's all different for each team. So that's a different type of scenario to talk about maybe a different day because in baseball it's really hard when you're one organization where you cap out at like 127 million and you go to another team like the Yankees or so and they cap out at like 300 million or something like that, you know. So you know I don't want to get into too much of that, but you know I think that's a great topic to start off with for us, Mike. That's a great one to kind of just get our kind of say out there on how we feel about certain things going on nowadays with organizations. So thank you for bringing that up for sure. But I would
Oh, you
definitely would
must.
like to see if we can move on to our next topic here. We were just gonna kind of I thought it'd be kind of good for us to talk about who we think you know season's kind of coming down towards the end in the NFL. Um, few big games coming up. That's another thing we're going to talk about. Is there's three games we're going to touch on that are some big games this week. But kind of wanted to get your thought on what your top five NFL teams are right now. You know, and if you want, put them in order. If you want to just give them to me in no particular order, you know, feel free. But I kind of want to see where you stand right now on your top five teams right now in the league.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm probably not going to deviate too much from what I think the masses, so to speak, are sort of looking at themselves. I will say that at five, there's a little caveat attached to my five pick, it sort of explains itself when I get to it. I am going to go in order, Bud, or Anthony, from one to five. I'll start with one. You know, it's the old if you want to be the man, beat the man. Um, Cincinnati could technically say they beat the man, but you know we're not talking about last season. We're talking about this season. Right now, I tell you what. When Kansas City when they lost Tyreek, you know it was a big loss, and you didn't know exactly how it was going to affect the team. Certainly how it was going to affect Patrick as they moved forward, even with Patrick with Kelsey there. Um, but you know, you talk about organizations that are fairly well run, and I think we could submit Kansas City as they're currently formatted. You know, Andy Reid is a head coach. Obviously, you know, Bieniemy is there as an offensive coordinator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think organizationally speaking, though, they've been a sound franchise for a number of years. Now, I will say just real quick, you know, do you give somebody $500 million? I'm going to probably shy away from that partially. That's a lot of money. I know that Patrick is Patrick, but you've got to look organizationally at what this type of money does to the balance sheet. And by the balance sheet, I mean to your roster going forward. And I know they do, but that's a lot of money, you know. But it's sort of like the old adage, you know, if you're going to give somebody money in basketball, would you give it? Who would you give it to? Michael Jordan. Blah blah blah. So right now, my point being, Patrick might be that one NFL player you say, okay, I could see giving this guy $500 million. What I did like about Kansas City, and this speaks of their organization as a whole, is what they went out and knew they had to do to substitute, so to speak, for Tyreek, for the loss of Tyreek. I think in doing so, I'm now at the point where I think truly when this first happened, I think you and I talked about this, and we thought it might be difficult, obviously for them to replace Tyreek. And I'm not going to say they've replaced Tyreek, but what they have done, I think, is they've given obviously Patrick more weapons to work with. It's a process. I think everybody expected the names involved to come in and this was just going to gel and we're just going to go out there and we're going to rip off 45, 50 points a game and it's going to be an undefeated season and we're just going to go be Super Bowl champions. As we know, it doesn't work that way, but it's a work in progress. But I think at this point in the season, you're seeing that work obviously begin to truly pay off. Back after Super Bowl 55 and the weaknesses that were revealed in the Kansas City offensive line, by Tampa Bay, they went out and addressed it last year. Had some successes, some failures. Obviously, that came to light again in the AFC Championship game with Cincinnati. But again, you're a work in progress. So I think what you're seeing now is the success of the offensive line and what Patrick's doing with his receivers. The running game is, I'll say it's adequate. Is showing me that, and I always like to use two terms, regardless of the sport you're talking about. I don't care if your lineup is Hall of Fame members from top to bottom. If you don't have, if you don't have production, and for the most part you're injury free, you're probably not going to succeed to the level that you hope to. But where Kansas City sits right now, and going forward, if they manage to stay healthy, to me, they look like they're obviously right now they're the team to beat, at least coming out of the AFC. Just like where they're at, like what they're doing. So many different weapons for Patrick to work with. The defense is solid. They're not stellar, but they're solid. And where they're at right now, they're my number one team. Now, transitioning to two, I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. I was with him coming out of Alabama, and then obviously with the transfer to Oklahoma, I still thought he was a solid kid. I actually thought at the time, I was actually hoping that Denver would draft him. I thought he could be a solid character guy. I think an upside on talent, but he was a work in progress. I think what you're seeing right now with Jalen, and this is a young man who you and I were talking about until just recently. He's never had back-to-back seasons, going back to high school, where he's had the same coach. I mean, this is what some of his struggles have been. And in defense of a situation like that, it's hard to really truly understand where you're at as a professional athlete if you don't have consistency, and that starts with coaching.
I agree with you on that, definitely on that.
So what I think you're seeing right now with Jalen, you're seeing, and he is, I think, justifiably, he's in the MVP consideration. I think he's earned that right. If he continues to play like he is right now, he deserves most definitely to be, in the conversation at the end of the season. Philadelphia, I think, is the most balanced football team of the five. I think they present all of the consistencies that you're looking for on both sides of the ball right now. Special teams, defense, offense. I just think right now an experience factor with Kansas City places them slightly above Philadelphia for me right now. But coming out of the NFC right now, and at my number 2 position is Philadelphia. But again, production, stay healthy. Let's see what the next 5 weeks hold. As the regular season plays out. Number 3. The defense to me is still slightly suspect. But with Miami, you're looking at a team right now that's averaging about 33 points a game over the last 4 games. This is a 33 point per game offense. And so I'm obviously, looking forward to the game tomorrow that they're going to play, with San Francisco. Um, but that'll come up a little bit
Yeah, that's a
later
game we're gonna
with some of
dive
our
into, so we'll definitely get into that a
yeah.
little bit.
But right now, I like what I'm seeing on the defensive side. Like I said, are they a stellar defense? No. Are they a competent defense? Yes. But on the offensive side of the ball, I really, really like what I'm seeing out of Tua. My only concerns is I really don't feel Tua should be out there. I think that's unfortunately, and I'm not going to delve into this greatly, but real quick, I think it's a failure on the part of the Miami organization to put this young man back out there. I really do. He's one hit away from a potential catastrophe. Let's hope it doesn't happen. He's playing well. Uh, I actually think he can also be put into the MVP consideration. Um, not one or two, but he should be in the conversation. He's having a fantastic season. I do like Miami's balance. Again, solid defense on the offensive side of the ball over the last 4 games, 33 plus points per game. They're showing that they can play with anybody. Um, so the consistency is there. So right now they're my number
3 team. Okay.
3. Number 4. Everybody is popular pick at the start of the season is Buffalo. I like Buffalo a lot too. I became a huge Josh Allen fan last year with the divisionals against Kansas City. That's when I recognized him as an elite quarterback. I know you were already there with him as an elite quarterback, but that game alone sold me, period, lock, stock, and barrel on Josh Allen. I like what I see from a leadership standpoint with this young man. I certainly hope that the injuries that he's dealing with right now aren't going to compromise his ability down, as we go forward with the rest of the season. Potentially it could. Let's hope
Yeah.
it doesn't. Uh, and I know they're battling with some injuries. They have all season, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But I still believe they're a solid ball club. Um, will they be in the AFC Championship game? That's to be seen. But currently, better on the offensive side than I thought they would be with the running game. That was my biggest concern. I am a little bit concerned with Josh's picks. He's sitting at 10 right now, a little excessive. I know he likes to tend to force the ball sometimes. Those are things that you can address and hopefully correct. But the 10 picks is a little unusual for him, so I wouldn't be overly concerned. But I like what I'm seeing from them as a whole, and their running game is showing more than I thought it would. But again, time will tell. Let's see where they as these next 5 games progress. But I've got them at the 4th spot right now. Now, as I said, there's a caveat to 5. I recognize Dallas, firstly, for what I'm seeing on the defensive side of the ball. This team is a terror. What they did to Minnesota, that wasn't by mistake. That's what this team is capable of.
I agree. That defense, like you said, the defense is insane, led by Micah Parsons. I think he's almost there as far as dethroning Aaron Donald as the best defensive player in the NFL. Um, Obviously, he's had a tremendous year, things like that, and I foresee him still playing at that top level um, as he keeps moving on in his career. So, like I said, I think he's very, very close. It could be to a point where maybe at the end of this year, going in next year, he does dethrone Aaron Donald as the best um, defensive player in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. He has a potential to completely dominate a game just by himself. And those type of players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, are few and far between.
Yep.
You know, uh, so defensively, I mean, they're absolutely stellar. There may be only one other defense playing as well as they are right now, and I'll get to them in just a second. But from an observation standpoint with Dallas, I still think sometimes Dak tends to make a few more mistakes than I would care for a person who's been in the league as long as he has. I think sometimes he tends to force the issue or try to. Um, that's hit or miss sometimes. I'm not going to say that Dak is the exception. I'm just going to say he's it's just a progression thing. Will he ever outgrow that, so to speak? I don't know, but right now I'd like to see fewer forced issues out of Dak, if you will. Um, Offensively, the two back set that they rotate with, I'm in favor of it, but I think Zeke is on the back end, production wise. Uh, if you're going to continue down if you're going to continue this direction with a two back set, and if you're going to alternate them, I should say, you can continue to utilize both. Zeke is not an every down back. I never thought he was. Even coming out of Ohio State, I didn't think he was an every down back. Um, where they're at right now, if they continue to rotate, that can work. You get speed and you get power, and I think that's a good combination to have. That's a good way to wear down a defense. And you've got a versatile back and you've got the power back. So if you can continue to make that work, that's all to your benefit, and that can carry you a long way in the playoffs. So I've got Dallas as a caveat at 5, and that other half of the caveat, or the equation, if you will, is going to be the San Francisco 49ers. And we'll get into this, like you said, in just a minute. I really, really love what I'm seeing out of the San Francisco 49ers. I refer back to the loss to the Denver Broncos, and it's a loss I know they regret because potentially it could affect their playoff positioning down the road. That's a game they never should have lost. Never should have lost that game.
Yeah.
That was inexcusable. Even with the injuries, that was inexcusable. But that's neither here nor there. It's done with. It's time to move on. But where they sit right now, defensively, this team defensively is playing as well as any defensive unit in the entire league. And they're slowly now getting all of their players back.
No, definitely.
And so as this season progresses, and again, I will beat this into the ground ad nauseum. Execution, production, but you have got to stay injury free. That's my biggest thing. Stay injury free. And right now, where San Francisco sits, they're getting their guys back. And and I think they're a very balanced team. I love Jimmy Garoppolo. I know a lot of people don't. I love this guy. Is he a top tier quarterback? Probably not. But he's a good system quarterback, and he's a good game manager. And he is the guy they need, and that's the guy they have right now. And this is maybe as close to a complete team, aside from Philadelphia, as there may be in the entire league. So right now, as a caveat to 5, I'm sort of going to allow 2 teams to share the space button. I'm going to go, Anthony, with Dallas and San Francisco at the 5.
Well, no, that I agree. I agree totally with you. I'm gonna go from 5 to 1 in my list, just because you kind of touched on these 2 teams in my list. My 5 is the Cowboys. That's who I do have there right now, and it's a lot to what you said as far as defensive wise. I love what their defense is doing. I think Micah Parsons, like I said, can dethrone Aaron Donald, and if you throw, you overthrow somebody like that, it's because you're making a huge. You're not just making plays out there here and there. You're getting a sack or something. You're changing the dynamic of the game, whether it be you're making a huge stop on 3rd down to get the ball back, whether you're making a forced fumble, a sack, interceptions, things like that. This guy does it all, which helps Dallas a lot. Now, the only thing that scares me with them is the offense. The offense not being as great as it is. And I used to be a really big Dak fan, and I used to think that he could really lead this team a lot. And I think what has hurt Dak a lot this year, and a lot of people don't realize it, is the loss to Amari Cooper. Cooper, I think, was the best wide receiver that Dallas had, in my opinion. So, I know a lot of people think that CeeDee Lamb's there. CeeDee Lamb's great. He does have his issues, with catching. He's great when he makes huge plays, things like that for them. That's their main wide receiver, though, right now, and teams know that. But the one thing I am going to jump on there that you talked about that I do like the 2-back system. I think that works for them. Because in my opinion, Tony Pollard cannot carry the whole load in Dallas. Like, if you were to just go ahead and get rid of Zeke, I don't think Tony Pollard is big enough, strong enough. Of course, the kid's fast. He's dynamic for sure. But as far as carrying a whole load for a team for a whole season, I don't see him doing that. I don't see him being a guy that can get handed off the ball, 25 to 30 times a game and last the rest of the season. So I think this actually works now better for them where Zeke can get the rest that he needs and Pollard could come in and give him that little bit of rest and let Zeke come in when they need those, third and twos to run it in or the goal lines, the goal line runs in. I think it's going to help Zeke a lot more as he's getting older. I think it's going to help Dallas a whole lot more. I know they pay him a lot, but they might have to, adjust things later on for them. But I do like the Cowboys at 5, for that. My 4 team is the 49ers. I'm jumping directly on what you're saying with that as far as the defense, as well as they're playing. I love the addition to Christian McCaffrey. I think that's a huge addition for this team to make them better. But yeah, like I said, I'm jumping on them with that. Number 3, Buffalo. I have Buffalo in mine. Let me see what else I got here. Hold on one second. So Buffalo 3, I have Kansas City 2 and Philadelphia 1. I'm just going to kind of run them off here a little bit because we're going to kind of get into a few of these games with these with some of these teams. But Buffalo, just kind of run off there since you kind of touched on them. I kind of agree everything with what you said. Josh Allen's doing a great job with this team. Stephon Diggs is making huge impacts on this team.
Yeah.
I kind of think Stephon Diggs, you kind of threw out there that Tua should be in the MVP talks. I think Diggs should be in those talks also. I know a lot of people talking about what Tyreek has done. Even Justin Jefferson and those two guys are amazing for their teams. But if you look at Stephon Diggs' the numbers, they're just about even with those two guys also. But he has doubled those two in touchdowns this year. Hill has had 4 touchdowns. Jefferson has 5, and Diggs has 10 this year. And he actually has more catches than the two of them. Also, he's only like 30-yard difference as far as yards, less than the two. So I think he's amazing with what he's done with that team. Also, helping Josh Allen. You talked about the picks. I know he is kind of high up there, but I think he's going to be fine. I think he makes the great adjustments that he needs to, but he's going to be fine. Kansas City and Philadelphia, they kind of could jump back and forth for me as far as the better team. I think they're about even, in my opinion. I think that could be who we see in the Super Bowl anyways here. I think that could be a possible Super Bowl matchup. So we'll see how that goes. But those are my top 5 teams also. We're about even. I think the only difference we had is excuse me, you having Miami in there was a huge difference. I did think about Miami. Minnesota also came into play for me for them, but ultimately I think this is just kind of my list for now. But of course, Miami and Minnesota could jump into those.
Yeah, and real quick, and I know we'll talk about this game a little bit. I just think this is one reason the Miami San Francisco game is so pivotal. I think this is, I wish they could have transitioned to this game to a prime time event, so to speak. I think this game warrants that type of coverage because this is a big game. This is a bigger game for Miami than I believe it is for San Francisco. I think San Francisco, when they're healthy, they've established themselves as to how talented they are. I think for Miami, this is a game it's more important for them to win than it is San Francisco. To go into San Francisco and win this game would speak volumes about them as a team, particularly if Tua performs well, and it could speak volumes about where they're going to be potentially at the end of the season, as in regards to potentially home field advantage in the playoffs. So we'll see. But that's a pivotal game.
So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a real quick break for a second, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about 3 different games. But give me 1 second and we'll be right back, guys. right, everybody, welcome back to the Almost Mediocre Sports Guys podcast. This is our first episode that we're doing. One of the last things we're going to get into here, um, we had picked three games that we thought would be.
Hey, real quick, but we are going to talk about the potential MVPs too, correct?
Um, well, I mean, we can definitely get into that if you want to. I kind of want to get into the games.
Oh, no, that's
Um,
fine. Let's keep
um,
it on.
um,
Yes, most.
I definitely wanted to get into these games. First game I think we're going to kind of get into that I feel is kind of important is the Washington at the New York Giants. I know this may not be a huge game to a lot of people, but it does kind of represent for the NFC East on whether these they can get all four teams in possibly if Washington wins this game. Um, Heineke has definitely been stepping up since he's taken over the role as quarterback. With the benching of Carson Wentz, whether he got hurt and was out. But Washington is a 2-point favorite in this game. Um, how do you feel about this game, Mike?
I'll tell you what. Daniel Jones is a little bit of a struggle for me. I know all the hoopla that was built around this guy coming out of Duke, and I understood to a degree. I thought it was a little bit over exaggerated with this young man. Now, I will say in defense of him, since he's been with New York, that's a train wreck waiting to happen prior to this season. It's been tough for this young man. I give him credit for what he's endured, a lot of coaching changes. So I give him credit for hanging in there and at least attempting to be the best that he can be, so to speak.
No.
As the team's currently built, if you will, I guess I'm a little surprised by the 2-point spread favoring Washington. I do agree with it, but typically when you're looking at teams that are for the most part that fairly equally matched up, so to speak. Typically, the spread will favor the home team and give them 3 points just for the home field.
Yeah, no,
I do
definitely.
agree with the Washington favoring Washington to win the ball game. I do like what I see in Heineke. Now, is he a Super Bowl quarterback? I don't necessarily feel he is. What I do like with Heineke, I think he's a great leader. I think he's competitive. And to tell you the truth, he may have saved Ron Rivera's job.
Yeah, and I think
Because
you're
you got to
absolutely right with that.
Washington has been missing their best defensive player for the entire season. Now he is eligible to come back, but as I'm understanding, as you and I are speaking, that's not going to happen this week. Obviously,
Yeah,
it may not happen next week.
definitely not. And I totally agree with what you're saying as far as he may have saved his job definitely. I agree totally that I am a fan of Heineke. The guy goes out there and works hard out there. You could tell every single play he's giving it his all. He is smart, in my opinion, too. He makes the right decisions. He's not flashy. He's not gonna He's not gonna throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns or something like that. He's gonna be in around that 230, 240 game manager. Maybe a touchdown here. He's gonna rush for. He can, if he needs to, he can rush for 40, 50 yards in a game. But on the Giants side, I think their defense is still pretty good. I think they have a pretty good defense
I
still.
agree.
I think a lot of teams are kind of just starting to figure him out a little more. Daniel Jones started off great, but he's really kind of settled down more. Same thing with Saquon. Saquon's had a great year. I think that's a huge thing for the Giants this year, is the gameplay from Saquon Barkley. Um,
Well, that's a great point too,
yeah,
Bud. Because referring back to Daniel for just a second, this is a young man who, with Saquon's injuries, he didn't have that buffer in the running back position. And Saquon is a great back. He was a great back coming out of Penn State. The injuries have just nullified his ability to be the back I really thought he could be.
exactly.
I don't think we're going to see. I don't think potential we'll ever see the true Saquon. I think the injuries have taken a portion of that away. I think, but what is there though is outstanding, and it can be a franchise changing back.
I don't know. I think what we're seeing here is I mean, obviously, it's not the college Saquon. I mean, we never got any of that, which it happens with all these players. I mean, it's not like we ever seen the college Barry Sanders when we were in here. I mean, the guy rushed at Oklahoma State. There was years he rushed for like 2,500 yards in a season, so we never got to see that either. So,
Yeah.
but the injuries did hurt him. But I feel like this year he hasn't had any injury problems. He's
Yeah.
rushed over 1,000 yards this year. I mean, he's right up there, the top of the list. He might. I think he's over 1,000 this year. If not, he's definitely close too.
Yeah.
His play has been stellar for them, which has been great. He's had a couple of games where he's been off for them, but I think that's a huge upside for the Giants moving
No,
forward.
and he's
In,
definitely
in my opinion,
he's
I do have Washington winning this game too. I think
yeah.
Washington is gonna find a way to pull this game out. I think it's gonna be a very very good game though. I think it's gonna be close. It's gonna come
I
down to
hope so.
the end. I don't see either team running away with this. I think it's just like I said, another big game because of the fact if Washington does win this, it gets them closer to a chance for that whole entire NFC East to get into the playoffs, which is crazy considering the past few years. 5 to 10 years even how bad this division has been.
Oh yeah.
It's always just been Dallas, 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 Dallas. And then Philadelphia the past few years has been coming on strong, and now they've even dethroned Dallas. Now, the Giants, the way that they start off the season, nobody expected that. Unless people other than new people in New York and stuff, Giants fans and stuff like that. They
Well, and I
you know
will
they
say
they
real
had
quick,
them.
and I will say real quick, but in regards to the division itself, and I agree with you. It's almost unheard of to see an entire division making it to the playoffs. As a matter of fact, off the top of my head, I can't recall the last time. That being said, and again, and as I said, I'll beat this into the ground to ad nauseum. And hopefully they're healthy. The Eagles and Dallas have one game remaining
Yeah,
here coming soon, and it's going to be in Dallas. And I certainly hope that that game is. It may not be for first place, but it could have certainly playoff implications. And that's going to be just a massively important ball game, I
yeah,
think, when they
I
when they
agree.
meet. But the division as a whole, as you said, is fantastic. It's competitive. It's back to being the NFC beast and not the NFC least.
Yep, definitely. I agree. So moving on, we're gonna go and kind of touch on the next game I have here is and I'm sorry, you said you had Washington winning the game also too,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay.
Sir.
So the next game I have is the New York Jets at the Vikings, and this game's kind of interesting because of the fact of all the stuff that's been kind of going on with the Jets recently, with the benching of Zach Wilson. You
Best
know,
decision they made all season.
yeah, right. I mean, they bench him, and Mike White comes out and does what he does. I mean, the guy's played. He played great last week. I think he looked tremendous. He was slinging the ball downfield. I mean, the guy looked like he was sitting in the pocket playing like he's 10 years into the league. Working on his way to another Pro Bowl appearance or something like that. And I think that's a huge. That's huge for the Jets as far as going forward because I don't think Zach Wilson was the answer for them at all. And I think with him playing more, I think it just leads to more losses. Um, but I think now White has kind of rejuvenated the Jets a little bit, um, and I think that's going to help them move going forward because they need that. They really need that, especially being in that another East division, the AFC East. The AFC East and the NFC East are the top two divisions in the league right now. They're
Yeah.
going up against Buffalo. They're trying to beat out Buffalo. They're trying to beat out Miami, and even New England. New England's a strong team too. I mean, they're out of the four teams, they're probably fourth out of that division for sure. But excuse me, I just think that the Jets with Mike White actually might make a little bit of noise. Their defense isn't terrible. Sauce Gardner, has been doing his thing out there, making plays for them. I know they're a little beat up at running back. James Robinson was a little upset when he got traded there. He thought he was going to be a little bit more involved in the play time. I know he's upset about not getting any playing time. Last week he didn't even. I don't think he even got any touches last week, and he was upset about that. So I know they have a little bit of stuff going on there, but I think they're still a decent team. I think they could make some noise. But as far as the Vikings, it's all about what Vikings team are you going to get? Are you going to get the Cousins to Jefferson connection where they can go out there and beat you dead to the ground and Dalvin Cook can run like crazy over you? or you're getting the Vikings team that got beat up by the Dallas Cowboys. Excuse me. That's the problem with the Vikings, and that's why, in my opinion, I didn't think the Vikings deserved to make my top five, is because you never know what team you're getting out there. Um, they could be the
Yeah.
best team in the league. They could beat Philadelphia. They could beat Kansas City. They could beat all these teams, or excuse me, they could be a team that doesn't that gets beat down like they did against the Cowboys. Um, so Cousins is one of those quarterbacks that you just never know. You never know what's going to happen. Prime time, he always has a problem with it. So obviously, when it comes down to playoff time, and big game situations, he's always struggled. And I think this is one of those games that's going to kind of put him to the test because he's going up against a pretty good defense. But I do have the Vikings winning this game. They are a 3-point favorite. But I think this is another game that actually stays close too.
I wouldn't, and again, I like your observation about it's hard to gauge the Vikings as to what you're going to get game to game. I will say this real quick, referring back to White. One of his biggest contributions to the Jets, and I'm referring back to last week, was not so much just his play on the field, it's his accountability factor as it pertains to the team itself. He's a young man who, if he knows there's a criticism to be accepted, he's quick to do it. But he also understands how to interact with his teammates.
Yep.
And everything you see out of Zach Wilson is me ball, and that doesn't translate, that doesn't fly in the NFL.
I
Jerry
agree.
Glanville said a long time ago, the NFL, the words stand for not for long in this league. And when you have somebody who conducts himself like Zach Wilson does, you're not going to be in this league very long if you don't start taking accountability for your actions. It looks bad as it relates to the press when they're talking to you, and it looks even worse in the locker room when you have to walk by the guys that you just failed on the field trying to win a football game, and you don't accept accountability for it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if White is the answer ultimately going forward. I think that can be determined next offseason between potentially himself and maybe it is Zach Wilson. I don't know. But I like White going forward with the Jets in no way, shape, or form unless White absolutely bottoms out. For me personally, at this point in time, you can't go back to Zach Wilson. That's a mistake. You've already shown a lack of confidence in him by pulling him. So now it's full steam ahead with White, and let's see where he can take us. You live with him, you die with him. Let's see what he does.
I agree.
It's going to
Yeah,
be it's going to be a tough matchup in Minnesota. Minnesota's a 3-point favorite, and you know it's hard to say again. And I'll say one other thing, and this relates to Kirk Cousins, and you touched on this too, Anthony. I like Kirk Cousins. He seems like a good man, a good family guy, but is he that go-to quarterback on one of my team to win the big game? He's not. I don't think he's that guy that can get you that big win when you need it. This isn't the big win. This is the Jets, and it's still in the regular season. Minnesota's favored by 3, like we talked about. I think they'll cover the 3. I think it's going to be a close game, like you're talking about. But I think at this point right now, White's still in the process of learning. The Jets are a good football team. They're up and coming. If we get the right Vikings team, they could dominate this game. If we get the other Vikings team, this could be a struggle. But I'm going to go with 3 in the Vikings to win this game, bud.
I agree. I definitely agree. And then I think the biggest game this week, in my opinion, I think it is the biggest game, and we touched on, is that Miami 49ers game.
I'm going to go 1A with that game and 1B with Cincinnati and Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is the 49ers are a 4-point favorite. I personally do have the 49ers pulling off this game because, for one, they are at home.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, that defense has just been stellar, and I think they're going to keep pushing that forward. The other thing is they really need to keep winning. You touched on San Francisco having some bad losses earlier in the season, where they have to kind of play a little bit of catch up. But I think they can because of the team that they assembled, getting Christian McCaffrey, the defense getting a lot better. Jimmy seems to be settling in a whole lot better too, after kind of the rocky starting with Trey Lance over him and time this and that. he's kind of pushed that aside and said, okay, I'm going to go out here and do what I need to do to get this team back on track.
You know
So
right now, about Jimmy G. He has almost 2,400 yards passing. He's got 16 touchdowns. He's got 4 interceptions.
mhm.
Yet all we continually seem to hear out of this is, well, he's not the guy. Trey Lance is the guy.
Yeah, no, I agree,
It's
it does feel
my
like, and I get it. You know, I don't really have a lot of bad things to say about Trey Lance as far as coming in. You know, is he NFL ready? Maybe. I mean, he seemed to be all right. I mean, first game this season,
But
he
Jimmy
wasn't
G
great. I mean,
is in it.
I thought he looked great against the Chicago game was pretty good for him. He looked good there. I believe is the one game. But I feel like when you have a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo who has taken you to a Super Bowl, NFC Championship games, you know, last year they were not picked to be in the NFC Championship game at all. You know, um, and as well as they played, as he didn't play spectacular. But then again, why did he have to? You know, if
He's a
they're, you
game
know,
manager.
exactly, and that's his, you know, repertoire is being a game manager. You know, same thing with Kansas City when they were playing well before they had Mahomes. They had Alex Smith who was doing that. Um, but I think, in my opinion, I think that Jimmy's fine. I think he's playing, you know, great ball right now. I don't see that changing. Um, Miami's on the other side though is a great all around team themselves though too. You know, you touched on Tua, how great he's been playing. Um, it's going to be tough for San Francisco though to control both Hill and Waddle in my opinion. Those two guys are amazing with what they've been doing this year. Um, but I still think that, you know, saying all that with Miami, I just don't feel like they'd have enough against that defense to pull it off. Um, Even on their defensive side, you know, I think Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuels, they're just going to end up being a little bit too much for them. And in the end, I believe San Francisco will pull this one off.
Tua's got almost 2,600 yards passing right now, but 19 touchdowns, 3 picks. This is in limited time. This is, we're not even
Yeah,
talking about the injuries and the missed games.
yeah,
So, and like we talked about earlier, I know you were big on him coming out of college. It took me a while to come around. I really like what I see. I just don't believe he should be out there, but that's neither here nor there right now. He's there. Let him play. What I do like, San Francisco 49ers over the last 4 games, 10 points allowed per game. In the second half of each of these 4 games, 0 points allowed. It's amazing what this defense is doing. That defense matched up against the Miami offense, averaging just over 33 points a game over the last 4 games. So this is a game to me, like we talked about. It's so important for Miami, I believe, to establish themselves. I think they're showing improvement, but a win here really says a lot about where they could potentially be going if they can overcome that defense. But I'm going to agree with you here. If it were in Miami, it's debatable. I might still lean towards San Francisco because of the defense, but this is in San Francisco. I love Jimmy G. I love his leadership. I love his game management. The addition, as you said, of McCaffrey is astronomically important. That right there is the piece they may have been missing to solidify a potential Super Bowl appearance. Do they cover the 4? Wow. I'll tell you what. I'm going to allow for 3 in the home field advantage, so I'm going to say the Dolphins keep it under the 4, but I still like the 49ers by 3.
okay, no, definitely. I agree with you. I agree with everything you said. So it looks like we both kind of agree, definitely on who we're picking for these games. Definitely let us know too, everybody out there. You know, if you get a chance to watch this, throw us out there. You know who you guys have for those 3 games. Also, who you guys pick,
And real
and
quick,
let me know if
real
any of you
quick,
guys are fans of these 6 teams that we talked about. Also, we'd like to hear that too.
real quick, I got my 1A, 1B. Watch that Kansas City game. I'm telling you, that's a trap game. That's a trap game. Cincinnati could pull that game out. They're starting to come
I
around.
mean, it
Cincinnati
could be
could
a
win.
trap game, or it could just be Mahomes going out there throwing for another 350 and 4 touchdowns or something like that. So, you know, who knows? But you know, I think this was great, Mike. I really enjoyed doing this first podcast here. I look forward to us moving forward into this. Um, I do realize that we kind of talked a little bit more on the football side this time for the first one, but we kind of wanted to get ourselves going with this, everybody, and kind of stuck around what we know most, what we know best, just to, for us to kind of get our first one out. But we will definitely broaden more as far as getting into a little bit more basketball with that starting. College basketball is going to be starting. Um, Going and getting more in depth with that. Also, even with the possibly try to get into some more college football. As new polls will be out, we were going to find out exactly who's going to be in the playoffs coming up here, too. Um, so
Go
definitely,
Horn Frogs.
so definitely stick around with us, everybody. We're definitely gonna be trying to get more in on this. We will definitely try to see how what we could do as far as a schedule for everything that we want to try to keep doing this as much as possible, because this is, like we said when we first started, this is something we enjoy. This is something we do. We literally, this is what we do on our downtime. We get together, on video chats, and we just talk about this stuff. So, and this is what made us want to do this. Just throw it out there on a podcast and kind of get everybody else's thoughts about this. How everybody else feels nowadays about sports. Where it pertains to anything. And it's not necessarily just who's gonna win, who's gonna lose. We talked about organizations dysfunctions today. Even to let us know everything that you guys think about what's going on in the wide world of sports. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be the main sports. If you guys are into tennis, you guys are into golf, things like that. We'll touch base on as much stuff as we possibly can for everybody out there. But we just want to give thanks to everybody that takes time to take a look at us. Let us know what you guys think. But like I said, we will be hopefully doing this a whole lot more for everybody, because this is something we enjoy. So we definitely appreciate you guys being here. We're going to go ahead and sign off for our first podcast. Anything else you'd like to put out there, Mike, for everybody?
Just real quick, a little addition on to what you were talking about, Bud, in regards to, hopefully, potential viewers, and hopefully they'll continue to grow. For any nerves that we may have exhibited during the first podcast, probably more so for myself, bear with us. It's a little bit more difficult than you realize sometimes to be in front of a camera. I give credit to all the people that do this regularly. A little bit more difficult, but a fantastic time. But I want to say real quickly, a real shout out to Mr. Anthony Alvarez as host of this show. Phenomenal job, great insight, and just on a personal note, he's my godson, and I love him to death. But as a person and as a dad, he's an outstanding individual, and he's bringing not only his character to the show but his insight. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this with him. And we both collectively look forward to interacting with you folks going forward. And again, as Anthony said, feel free to offer up criticisms, compliments, hints, tips, anything that you feel that will help us to make for a more enjoyable experience. We are always open to those suggestions. So my great appreciation to everybody, and certainly to Mr. Anthony Alvarez.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Mike. Definitely look forward to seeing and talking to you guys some more out there, and we will come up with some different stuff. But other than that, enjoy the games tomorrow. Have fun, and also be safe out there, everybody. All right, have a great
Go
day.
Niners!